Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball, and we're down to the final game of the season. This is it. It all comes down to this, the national championship of college basketball. It seems like the matchup of destiny, two teams that all year have been at the top of the college basketball world. Now they square off, Purdue and UConn. It's going to be a battle. We're going to preview it and then predict it. Tim, are you ready to go?
The matchup that I think most people, if not almost everybody, wanted to see, and we finally have it. So let's run it.
Let's do it. But before we do that, we're going to break down how those two teams got here. Starting with the earlier game, your Purdue Boilermakers advanced to the national championship, ending the Cinderella run of NC State 63-50. Both teams did not bring their A game. It was a very
Not
defensive
really.
matchup, especially in the second half as NC State started to slow down. Purdue went on their runs and really took control of the game. What stood out to me, at least, is how Purdue's defense paved the way. Tim, I'm sure you
Yeah.
have your reservations about the game, and you will talk about them in full in the Purdue, North Carolina recap video. So go check that out if you want Tim's takes on it. But I'm going to insert mine since I don't get a chance to there, but I do get a chance to here. So I'm going to stop yapping and actually say some stuff that matters about college basketball. Purdue's defense was mighty impressive, and it showed that they can win games just as much as their offense. Speaking of their offense, yikes, that was not their best game ever, especially
Lowest
in
point
the
total of the season for
especially in the
them.
turnover department. That was one where, they had some stretches of really, really sloppy basketball, especially from Braden Smith and Zach Edey. 10 turnovers combined, 16 total for the Boilers. And usually I think the magic number is around 13 or 14. Tim, you can correct me
It's
if I'm
usually
wrong.
13.
Yeah, like 13, the unlucky 13,
Anything
where
over
anything.
anything over 13 usually means trouble for Purdue, just because
Mhm.
of the fact that when they turn the ball over that many times. I mean, they score 63 in this one. They're usually not able to put up nearly as many points, but also they're not usually facing a team or playing a game where the other team isn't able to put up more than 50. And that's kind of what it came down to, is their defense was good enough in the half court that even with the points that NC State was able to get off of as many turnovers as Purdue had, they really couldn't get very much going against Purdue's set defense. So it really kept them against the ropes.
Yeah, another thing where Purdue, their kryptonite was on ball pressure. NC State did an excellent job picking up the guards in the half court, and then when the ball went down into Edey, swiftly bringing a double, but not committing reach-in fouls. This game wasn't very foul heavy at all. 21 combined between the two teams, 13 on NC State and 8 on Purdue, which is really light, especially for a Purdue game. That doesn't mean that NC State didn't deal with foul trouble, because um, most of their fouls were collected by like four guys. Multiple guys had three, and it impacted them, especially late in the game, including DJ Burns, who racked up two very quickly in the first half and then had to sit. Um, he was basically a non-factor in the game. More on that later, but I was definitely surprised at how poorly Purdue handled that on-ball pressure, and how impressed I was with NC State, their ability to generate loose balls and then jump on them.
Yeah, a big part of that for me, I think the thing that I was, least impressed by, or, most frustrated by, was Edie's lack of awareness on some of those digs. There was,
Really
he's dealt with it.
uncharacteristic.
Yeah, he's dealt with it all year, and quite frankly, he's handled it pretty well for a lot of the year, of knowing when those digs are coming, knowing that he has to use, ball fakes to try to fake them off, and then as soon as he puts the ball on the ground, like, they're coming. But not only did he not necessarily do a fantastic job with um dealing with the digs that came down, but he also had multiple times where even if the dig didn't necessarily come, he kept bringing the ball too low. And there was multiple strips or even jump balls that happened because when
Yeah,
he went to
sometimes he
go
just had the
turn,
ball taken right out of his hands sometimes.
he didn't hold anybody off sometimes, and it allowed the big to essentially just come right around and get right on the ball there. So I wasn't necessarily impressed by it. Obviously, Edie still had a pretty solid game, and in my opinion, more of a solid game than the stats will tell you. mainly just because of the fact that people obviously talk about how many points that Edie gets from free throws. He shot 2 free throws, still ended up with 20.
Yeah,
So,
congratulations. Foul Ming haters look away. They didn't send him to the line because NC State did a pretty good job
yeah, and you have to
keeping
give him credit
clean
for that.
guarding Edie, like actually
Yeah.
for once,
Yeah,
which
they
is
did a good job with that, and Edie obviously still got his on occasion, but they managed to not foul him a ton and still keep him to about 20, which for the way that Zach Edey plays and the fact that he's averaging just short of 30 points a game in the NCAA tournament right now, you have to view that as a victory. They just couldn't get other parts of their game going to
Mhm.
essentially battle that. Not many teams have been able to hold Purdue to 63 points in this stretch, or
I
even
mean,
on the season for that matter.
well, too bad NC State only scored 50. A lot of the heavy lifting was done by DJ Horn and um, Jaden Taylor, Butler transfer Jaden Taylor, who has really come up huge in pinches off the bench when, the Wolfpack have called on him. I think those two had really good games, but across the board, nobody else really stepped up. DJ Burns was essentially a non-factor. Guys like Mo Diarra and pretty much everybody else stunk when it comes to putting the ball in the basket for NC State.
Casey
And
Morrell was another one that was a big
Casey
struggle for them as
Morrell,
well. 0 for 5, 0 for 1 from 3. Like having that
donut.
your other two combined starting guards outside of DJ scoring 3 points total. That's not going to be a
Only
good
only
recipe for
one
them.
field goal made from the two of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
was only
bad.
one. O'Connell shot 1 3, made it, but he also didn't play much because he, believe it or not, injured himself tripping over the floor. He played 12 minutes.
Things happen, man. Things happen when you get to this stage. Weird stuff happens. This is just a weird run in general for NC State,
Yeah.
but one that you absolutely have to be proud of if you're a Wolfpack fan. Just to get to this point, what an accomplishment from one of the best seasons in Wolfpack history. So you have to give them their flowers along the way. And I know America is generally disappointed that NC State couldn't get the job done, but um, got to tip your caps.
Oh my gosh, the casual college basketball fans are absolutely fuming right now as they continue to see Purdue move on to the national championship. But yeah, in terms of the run that NC State made, super impressive. They're a super fun team. They're a very nice team to follow because there's not much to hate about them. Just
Nice.
they are. I can't find a better way to put it. But they're a very fun team to follow. Everybody loves DJ Burns and his personality. Even after the game, he was talking about how him and Edie were essentially just chatting up during the game about how big Edie is and how
Bro, not
difficult
gonna
it
lie,
is
you
to.
big as hell.
He literally was so funny. And he's just a funny dude. So
Hmm.
you got to give NC State their credit. They did not make this easy on Purdue, even if they didn't have a great game themselves. So it's definitely nothing to be ashamed of, and they had a fantastic run to get to this point. Hopefully they're able to sort of build off of this and not necessarily have this truly be the flash in a pan type performance. But we'll see what NC State's able to do from here.
And on the other side, UConn defeated Alabama 86-72. This is their 11th consecutive NCAA tournament victory by 13 points or more. So,
This one was a lot closer than the final score looks like for a lot of the game, though. For a
sure,
lot of people that just
sure.
looked at the score towards the end there, like this game was a battle for about around 2/3 of the game. The problem is Alabama really lost steam and UConn picked up the pace at the right time.
But a part of me, is just now realizing how scary that is just because Alabama stuck around and, only had a 4-point deficit at the half. This was one of
They
UConn's
tied the game in the
worst
second half.
games, one of UConn's worst games of the entire season. They did not bring it. And I think
They scored
Alabama
86.
played really well. Tim, I know. That's
This
why
was
it's
not
so.
one of their worst performances.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. There has been so much better from this UConn team. And just because
Oh,
they
well,
turned it
yeah,
on at
for
the end,
sure.
just because they turned it on at the end and made it a 14-point victory, they have not brought their A game unless you count the 30-0 run. I think that was UConn at their peak, firing on all cylinders. That
Okay,
wasn't
yeah.
it against Alabama. I think the strategy that Alabama used during the game, at least defensively, was really interesting. Um, they wanted to make Stephon Castle, the freshman, beat them. And so Stephon Castle just went, okay. And he did. He had
Okay.
21, and he was a really, really big factor, the driving factor of that Husky offense. Um, Donovan Klingen's hand being under wraps, I wasn't a huge factor, but it definitely is something to note, especially if he re-aggravates. There were some times where, he was a little bit sloppier with the ball than we're used to. Um, if that
Okay.
hand is 100% healthy, I think we have a slightly better performance from him. But,
He still
that's
played very solidly though.
sure, but that's just what
The big
UConn
the
does.
Yeah,
Like,
the biggest thing, especially about Klingen's performance, though, is dude is a mean shot blocker. Not only does he have like the height, but he
yes, he
has
is.
he has he has chase down speed. Like he has the ability to catch back up and use his wingspan, and he showed that during the game there. So that I think was the thing that I was most impressed by, in terms of his denial of a lot of what Alabama wanted to try to get in the paint. Even if they were able to get past their on-ball defense, if whoever there was on there, Klingen was just in the paint being like, good luck. He ended up with 4 blocks in the game. I think they ended up with 8 blocks total as a team. So that was a super impressive part of UConn's defensive performance of essentially stifling Alabama, whatever Alabama wanted to do in the paint. So they forced them to be an outside shooting team. Alabama did not shoot they still shot well, but they didn't shoot as well as I have seen them shoot at times in terms of um, just their electricity from outside, especially with guys like Mark Sears. I kind of was surprised Sears didn't shoot more from deep, especially when Alabama went down in the second half. He only shot the ball 6 times from three.
Well,
But
you don't
obviously he still
necessarily
had
want
a
to play
great
catch up
game.
ball in that situation, put up any
True.
ill-advised shots. You still want to look for the right shot instead of just like any
I got to
shot.
be
I get,
honest. I
I
don't think Alabama was finding the right shot though in a lot of those. In essentially where they went cold and
That's the
UConn turned it up
problem.
and they extended their lead, they weren't finding very good shots despite essentially trying to work the ball around type thing. So I don't know. I feel like obviously he's their best scorer and he's their most electric microwave scorer type thing. So when you're in a pinch, I figured he's the guy that you go to. But they were
I mean,
kind of going to
theoretically
various
speaking,
different
sure.
places.
So now moving on to the national championship game of Purdue and UConn, looking at some of the key matchups. The matchup that everybody is going to be talking about, the battle of the big men. College basketball's two best and most physically dominant and imposing centers, Purdue Zach Edey and UConn's Donovan Clingan. Kling Kong versus Godzilla, if you will. And what a matchup that will be. Um, Tim, I'll ask you this. Do you think that one, in a sense, holds an advantage over the other? And if so, where?
It's a really interesting argument looking into that because they are both obviously similar in stature, but their games are still different. Klingon doesn't play the type of like true bully ball I think that Edie does. In terms of an advantage, I would say in an overall sense, I think Klingon has a slight advantage in terms of his overall game, but where Klingon can get thrown off his game is how he is able to defend Edie. Truly, that Edie offense, Klingon defense. If Klingon isn't able to push with and battle Edie without fouling, that could get really bad from very fast. If he's able to and they're able to play essentially a clean game, I think you talk about Klingon's speed, Klingon's, athleticism, he can, make things difficult for Zach Edey on both ends of the floor. Because obviously he's a very good shot blocker as well. Edey hasn't necessarily faced somebody that is nearly as big as him that can also, quite frankly, almost block a jump hook. Like that's the type of athleticism that Klingon has. There's no denying that. If Edey doesn't like do a good job of creating his own space, I could see Edey just getting straight up blocked by Klingon. But it really comes down to is what is Klingon going to be able to do defensively on Edey down there without getting into foul trouble? and some of that is how the whistle is played. We won't be able to necessarily predict that. I don't think we're going to get like a very quick whistle, especially not with the way these two teams play. It's the national championship. You don't want to see it be, all free throws, but
Yeah, not again. We don't want a replay of Iowa and UConn in the women's bracket where a whistle not decides but plays a pivotal
massive
role in
influence.
the outcome of that game, and that's where the integrity of the game kind of gets soiled. But
Yeah.
to your point, Zach Edey's matchups across the board, has he faced anybody that is almost his size? No.
Not
Has
really.
Donovan Clingan regularly squared off of and prepared for somebody of his size and stature? Yes. And I bring it to UConn and Creighton in Ryan Kalkbrenner. Sure,
Mhm.
there is a bigger size gap between Edey and Clingan than Clingan and Kalkbrenner. But if you want to go watch that film, this is not Donovan Clingan's first rodeo
Oh.
preparing for somebody that is as big and as athletic as he is, because Zach Edey is certainly that, has developed into quite a physical monster. But yes, and this is getting into a little bit of conjecture and this, that, and the other. But
Welcome to everything we do, but
yeah, great.
there's
We
always
can't.
going to be a little bit of conjecture.
I think there's absolutely something to be said about the bully ball that Edey plays, and watching Ryan Kalkbrenner's game, there is a lot more finesse. There is a lot more of the technical base. Not to say that Edey doesn't have any. He is very technically sound. His footwork has improved a lot over the years. Very clearly, wouldn't have gotten to this point without it. But I think we can look at how Clingan has prepared for Kalkbrenner and get kind of an idea for how he's going to play Edey. Meanwhile, Edey playing against Clingan is definitely more of a wild card, in my opinion.
True, and I would definitely agree with the fact that is wild card, but some of that could also push to a little bit to Purdue's advantage
It
because they
could.
can see how Klingon would like to try to play this and try to game plan around that in a sense, and even how the entirety of UConn's defense in that fact, like playing against a center like Kalkbrenner. Okay, do they like digging down? Do they like doubling? Are they going to let Edey go one-on-one if they did with Kalkbrenner? I actually haven't watched that much of that clip or that tape there.
Well, now I think you're
Um,
getting into how UConn plays against Creighton versus how UConn would play against Purdue. And
yeah,
if there's a team that I would use, as film study to prepare, Creighton would not be the comp. I think
No, I'm saying more
Creighton is.
specifically how they choose to defend a center like that. Because as much as they want to defend like the entirety of
I
Creighton, that's
guess.
different. But defending a big like that is an entire different story. And I don't think that UConn would stray too much from what most teams have like a scheme of what they like to do
Mhm.
against big men that want to score the ball. They don't usually stray from that. And I don't think UConn will in this one as well, which is why I point out that Purdue might try to game plan around what they see that UConn does for that. And what I would look for Purdue to do is, regardless of how UConn wants to guard Edey, I would imagine that they would like to utilize more so than they did against NC State the whatever their sets that they run that get Edey post-ups in the center of the paint. Because we saw what happened when Edey posted up from the outside a lot more against NC State and allowed them to dig down and essentially double more and get those turnovers. I would imagine that against the force like Klingon, that they really want to try to make sure that they can do as much as they can where Edey is just going against Klingon. So I would put him in the middle of the paint as much as possible. We'll see what Purdue runs in terms of sets to make that happen, because we know how much they like ball screens, and they utilized that a lot in last game, which didn't actually work out super well for them.
Well, Tim, college basketball casuals won't exactly like that because of the three in the key. But the three in the key rules in college are a lot different than they are in the NBA and at
Get
other
one
levels
foot
of
out, get
basketball.
part of 1 foot out, and that 3 seconds starts again.
Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan is going to be the matchup to watch, sure, but like we said, for Purdue, for a lot of these bigger games, it's really going to come true here. What's everybody else going to do?
The supporting
Because
cast.
It's the supporting cast, and it's the guards. The guards for UConn, we know that they can absolutely show up and play their best basketball. Stefan Castle, Cam Spencer, even though Alex Caravan isn't a guard, he can definitely spread the floor
He
like
kind
a
of plays
guard.
more like one than he plays like a forward. So
I mean, he plays.
the way he shoots the
Yeah,
ball, he plays more outside like a guard than he plays like a forward.
so you can throw them into there.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I think the pressure is on Purdue's guards to play a lot sharper than they did against NC State, because not
Yeah.
only is this a tougher team, the margin for error will be so much less that if you have another 5 turnover game for Braden Smith and he like throws up another clunker and you don't get
One
guys
for
stepping
nine
up
from
in
the
certain
floor
areas,
was not pretty.
that is, and I was stunned, because we have seen Braden Smith play so much better than that. And he's never really been a concern all season of, hey, is Braden Smith going to show up? The answer was almost always yes, but now this is even a question because of how ugly it looked against NC State at times. Um, Simply put, they're just going to have to be sharper. They're going to have to bring it in order to keep up with UConn. And I think that's what is going to dictate the outcome almost more than when Edie and Klingon are doing their thing, because yeah, you can let them go one-on-one and do their thing and get theirs, but there are 4 other players on the court at any given time, and guess what, they matter.
Yeah, specifically in this one, you're completely right about Braden Smith. Like, we're not used to seeing that kind of performance. He's gotten rid of a lot of those performances that we saw last year that were more like that in terms of not being much of an offensive factor, and turning the ball over too much. I got to be honest, I don't see it happening 2 games in a row. He doesn't usually do stuff like that.
Just suggesting, just
No,
suggesting,
no,
not
I
saying it
totally
will
get that.
either.
Yeah, it's obviously when you see a game like that, it's a possibility. So what version of him are we going to see? Totally. But he usually has done pretty well of bouncing back from his poor
Yeah,
performances.
I
But
mean,
another thing to point out
am I concerned
is
about Braden Smith? No. But is it
yeah,
something to note that could be a factor if, and what could be? Yeah,
yeah.
sure. I mean, you could
Even
also
if
say the
he's
same thing for Lance Jones. What Lance
yeah,
Jones is going to show up? Is it going to be the Lance Jones that's spraying and doing the thing that he likes to call dancing? Or is he going to be the one that's pretty erratic and,
yeah,
more than likely a non-factor in the game? Um, you could see either or. Fletcher Lawyer, another one.
yeah.
I'm just saying it applies to all the guards, but just because we've recently seen a bad performance from Braden Smith, I think it especially applies. But there was something that you were going to say before I cut you off. Oops,
Well, I
my
was gonna
bad.
say, like, I mean, Braden still ended up with 8 rebounds and 6 assists, so he still found ways to
Yeah,
essentially be active in the game, even when his offense wasn't going. Obviously, I can see Purdue still having success if Braden isn't a huge offensive factor, as long as he doesn't turn the ball over. If he's still not getting like a ton of shots or getting a ton of shots to fall,
mhm.
I obviously 1 for 9 is not what you want to see, but he ends up only like not shooting the ball as much, still finding other ways to contribute. Then I can
Yeah.
see
Then you
that
go
being the
into
case.
distributor mode and you become less of a
Yeah, and
scorer,
and he can absolutely do that. He has done that, getting 15 assists in a game,
which is
tournaments, so on and so forth.
nice.
But I think the biggest thing to highlight from the guards matchup that you talk about, how Purdue's guards are going to be able to defend UConn's guards. Because if there's one thing that Purdue hasn't necessarily had as a big strong point throughout the year, it's essentially that on-ball defense aspect from some of their guards. Braden Smith is a decent guarder, but he is small. He is a decent defender, but he is not the biggest guy.
He
Fletcher
can
Lawyer
deny it no
has
longer.
he is pretty small. Fletcher Lawyer has
Wow.
more size, but he's not very strong, and he tends to get beaten one-on-one, essentially driving. Lance Jones is obviously a much better defender, but even he has had some games where he's had more poor performances on the defensive side. So because of how good UConn's guards are scoring the ball, Purdue's individual defensive performances from their guards are going to have to be much better than usual if they're wanting to keep this game reasonable. Because I got to be honest, with what I see out of this game, I do not see Purdue winning a track meet with UConn. If UConn is scoring the ball really, really, really well, as much as Purdue's offense can absolutely do that, I don't know if I necessarily see that being the case with the way that this game can go, and essentially a lot of the individual matchups, so on and so forth. There's a possibility that Purdue's also shooting the lights out, but that's what's so weird about this game is this game you could have a close game where either UConn wins by close or Purdue wins by close. You could also have a game where if either team has an iffy performance and the other one is like playing to their highest capabilities, I personally think we could see a blowout in either direction. Now, have we seen UConn put up a stinker like that? Not in a very, very, very long time. They have had a stinker like that this year.
Throw one more very in there.
Very. But that's just the volatility of these teams as they can play at such a high level that you could see any version of this game, which is kind of interesting to me, is why you end up seeing this game at 6.5 in favor of UConn. Like, I do get it in some sense based on the fact that UConn won by 14, put up 86 in their final 4 game, whereas Purdue only put up 63. But some of that I think could also be the way that either game went. Just the basic aspect of UConn facing a almost non-existent defense in a lot of cases with Alabama, or as they've known to be, versus sort of the grinded out gritty game that Purdue NC State was, with the way that the turnovers and shots weren't falling for certain guys, so on and so forth. But the 6.5 line surprises me a little bit, but again, because of the variability, you could literally put up any line and I'd be like, I mean, yeah, this could be a case where it ends up like that, and it could be unbelievably wrong.
So with that being said, before we actually predict this matchup, Tim, I'm going to ask you a rather open-ended question, which will probably require another rather lengthy answer, which is okay with me. If the Purdue Boilermakers do not win this game, is this year still a success, or do you consider it a failure?
No, I absolutely consider it to be a success based on what they have overcome throughout the season, the narratives, the pressure, the hate. Because boy, have they received a massive amount of hate this tournament, especially. So to me, I think the way that this team has played has proven the culture, the team, the talent that this team has. So even if they do not end up on the winning side of this matchup, I am certainly still very proud of this team, proud of the guys and what they've proven about essentially Purdue basketball, the program, the style of play, all of that kind of stuff. So regardless of how this game ends, I am very proud of this team. It's been super fun to watch, super fun to cover. Especially all of this happening during my time here at Purdue. It's been truly insane and really an honor to be a part of, because you talk about, not making it to the Final Four for 44 years. You think about how many students have come and gone from this university with good teams and good basketball and nothing like this experience. So I'm very grateful to be a part of it all. So we'll see where it ends up after tomorrow night, but I am very grateful to be a part of, all of this history for Purdue basketball.
And what a ride it's been. You still got one more game to play, though. So in the national championship game for all the marbles, I know that this answer is probably not going to be, it's not going to be obvious at all. Oh, no, we don't know who Tim is picking. But, but I have to ask you anyway, who do you got?
It's a tough one. And to be realistic, it is actually a tough one in the sense of how good both these teams are. Obviously, I have to ride with my Boilers because, to get into this point and the way that they've played up until this point, the resiliency that they've shown, their ability to bounce back from difficult points, either difficult games or difficult points in games, to be able to grind things out and win some of the tough games. I do believe they absolutely have it in them to take it to one of the 2 best teams in college basketball, or as you call them, the best team in college basketball, and beat them. Because that's why you play the game. Hey, that's not playing your hand. You've said that for these last couple of videos.
You're right, and I'm fully prepared to back up that sentiment, because in my opinion, right, there has been a team that has been head and shoulders above the rest. They feature a dominant center, excellent guard play, and a head coach with a brilliant offensive mind that will make sure that all of his players are prepared both mentally and physically for this game and firing on all cylinders. And that team is the University of Connecticut. And that team will be hoisting the national championship trophy for the second consecutive year. I know it's been a fun ride for Purdue. I would love if they hoisted the title. That would be amazing. And there would be nobody outside of the university that would be happier for them than me. However, I just sadly don't see it happening. Like I said, fully prepared to stick to my guns. And if I'm wrong, then I will be the first to tip my cap and congratulate the new champions. I just don't think the current champions will be dethroned.
All I will say is if Purdue wins tomorrow night, citizens of West Lafayette, Indiana, watch out. Because, oh
You
boy.
thought it was madness after they beat NC State. I can't even imagine the partying that's going to take place. I think the town
Craziness.
itself is going to have to close and or maybe burn to the ground just because
Purdue students have, as far as I've been aware and as far as I have seen, especially in what happened after the Final Four win, have been very respectful of property. They have not been, damaging, looting cars, any of that stuff that you have seen on some campuses
that's
with some
true.
of the celebrations.
That's very
So
true.
I
However,
I
however,
hopefully
however, and this applies to a lot of things in life, there's no time like your first time. So if it happens, I'm just saying, I'm mentally preparing myself for absolute bedlam.
you're mentally preparing yourself. I'm gonna be the one that's in it.
Good luck, buddy.
Hey,
But
hey, I'm hoping that I have to deal with it.
yeah, you're
Because
not going
that'd
to
be the
deal.
best day. That'd be one of the best days of my life.
Oh, please, you're not going to be dealing with it. You are going to be right in the middle of it, and I will expect footage from that partying that is going on if
We'll see.
if
We'll see.
the
That's why
Purdue
you play the game.
Boilermakers defeat the Connecticut Huskies. But that's all we
All I
got
know, I'm happy to be
for
here.
for being here. And our national championship preview and predictions. If you want to watch the other videos on the tournament, we have coverage for every single round as well as before leading up to it. Tim, you've been bringing Purdue recaps, and you're going to do just that one final time for the 2024 season. And I guess I've also done some stuff on Butler because, there's a second school that this podcast pretty closely covers, but, they haven't played basketball in about a month. So but if you want us to talk about anything else in the world of college basketball, let us know. And until next time, we out.